What's up everyone? Right now I'm on the National Mall here in Washington, D.C. and in this video I want to share with you 7 things to know before planning a trip here this summer.
So in my opinion, the first and most important thing to know when traveling to DC is that the National Mall is actually a lot more spread out than most people think it is, and it can really derail a trip if you don't have a good plan in place to visit the National Mall. So I've had a lot of people say their itineraries for visiting are things like go to the US Capitol building, then probably walk to the Washington Monument, and from there keep going to the Lincoln Memorial, see everything in between, really experience the National Mall fully. And that's a great plan. You can see so many amazing things, see all the history and the culture of DC, but with that plan, most people don't realize that going from the Capitol building to the Lincoln Memorial is actually more than a 2-mile walk. Just going straight shot, it'd probably be more than 45 minutes to an hour just walking there fully. So if you're gonna stop and see everything between there, look at all the sites, walk around some more, then that day is gonna be extremely long and it's gonna be strenuous, especially if you're not used to walking those distances or if you're in a group and some people can, some people can't. It's gonna derail the whole trip. So you have to have a good plan in place to see what you want to see on the National Mall, or take the bus system, the circulator buses, or a tour bus, something like that, so you can see everything you want without all of that overexertion and strenuous walking. And that brings me right on to my second point, and that's the fact that in the summer months, DC is insanely hot, and you don't want to be visiting things outside during the peak hours of the day because it's just going to be extremely uncomfortable for you and it's going to hamper your experience. So in the summer months, it's about like 90 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The humidity is off the charts, and if you're doing things like walking around the National Mall, like I talked about, there's not a lot of shade. And the sun's just going to be baking down on you. You're going to be boiling. You're sweating a lot. Your feet are going to be hurting. And no one's going to be having a good time during those hours. So I'd recommend if you're doing things outside like the National Mall, visit early in the morning before it gets too hot, or visit later in the evening when things are starting to cool down. And moving on to my third point, and another thing about sightseeing in DC is that all of the Smithsonian Institute places are free of charge, and you can go in and sightsee without having to pay a dime. So all of the main tourist places that you're going to go are free. The National Mall, all the museums, the National Zoo, everything like that. So if you're budgeting and trying to figure out how much it's going to cost you to visit DC, your main expenses are just going to be accommodation and food. But it's good to know that you're not going to have a huge sightseeing budget unless you're really doing a lot of extra activities that do cost money. And the free museums are actually also really important to note when on the National Mall. So if you're here in the summer, if we're talking about doing all that walking in the heat and the sun and everything, the museums can kind of break that up by going in for free, and they have AC, you can have places to sit, get some food, and relax a little bit, still take up the museum culture and see all that history, but also cool off and not have to be outside all day doing strenuous activity. And now I want to move on to start talking about things like transportation, arriving in DC, and just getting around in this city. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is point number 4. That's the airport situation. So there are 2 major airports servicing Washington, D.C., and they are the domestic airport, which is Ronald Reagan National Airport, and then there's Dulles, the international airport, which is farther out in Virginia. And I always tell everyone, if you can, fly into Reagan Airport, which is DCA, code DCA, because it's so much more convenient. If you go there, you can easily get the metro, like 25-30 minute ride into the city. It's pretty cheap. Or you can get a cab or an Uber, which is respectively not very expensive compared to the other airport. So always fly into Reagan if you can, because at Dulles, yes, there is a metro that goes all the way to that airport, but it's like an hour, hour and a half to get from there to where you're going in DC on the metro line. Or if you're taking a cab or an Uber, it's going to be like $60 or $70 because it's so far out of the city. It's just so much less convenient. So always fly into Reagan National Airport if possible. And speaking of transportation, I'm moving on to my 5th point now, and that is the fact that I don't recommend anyone get a car in DC unless you're going to be taking day trips outside of the city. I find that the first thing, most important thing, is that the traffic is just chaotic and not worth dealing with, especially during rush hour or driving on the highways outside the city. You're going to be stuck in traffic for hours, and it's really just not worth your time and energy and stress. And then moving on to, other than that, there's going to be parking chaos as well. So hotels might have parking and you have to pay for that, or it's free. But then if you're staying at Airbnbs, the street parking might not be good. They might not have parking spaces for you. And there's just so much to worry about. If you want to drive from place to place and park, you're going to cost an arm and a leg just to get a parking spot for a day. So it's an added expense and added stress that isn't needed because the public transit is very good here. And that transitions me to my 6th point, which is the fact that I think everyone should utilize the public transportation here in DC. I find it very affordable, reliable, easy to use, and it's pretty safe as well. I think that a lot of people have concerns especially coming from areas where there's maybe not a subway or reliable buses. But here in DC, it's super good, and I've lived here for 2 years. I've been able to get around without having the need for a car. And I feel that if you get to the airport, just go to the metro station, go to the kiosk, get a refillable card, and use that for all of your transportation needs here in the city. And that's the best way to get around. And finally, my seventh and last point that I want to make about visiting DC in the summer is that this is a peak tourism time in DC. So you're going to want to plan ahead for things such as tours of the White House, tours of the Capitol building. If you're getting Airbnbs or hotel stays, there's going to be a lot of people descending on the city, so you have to get things in advance. And as well, when you're visiting the National Mall, all the museums, all of the tourist sites, there's going to be a lot of people everywhere. So make sure that you're prepared for that. Don't feel overwhelmed by the amount of people. They might hamper your photo taking. There might be a lot more wait times at restaurants. It's going to be very busy and chaotic in the city over the summer, but don't let that deter you because DC is a great place to visit, and it's really lively in the summer as well. So thank you everyone for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed, you found it helpful, and I hope you come back to the channel. Have a great day.